we're going to talk about light collection. So this is the quicker items that you can get access to, and they tend not to be as disruptive to the operations. So you can get at some of this stuff, and it can help you point you in the right direction without immediately going to, hey, we need to jump on your machines and start imaging your hard drives and such. You can go to places and start looking. So the retrieval of a copy of desired files from a target system, right? It's fast, it's low-hanging fruit, right? The lightweight collections of like server logs, the firewall logs, and the event logs. If those are placed, especially if you're able to aggregate those, that's great. Security sensor logs. And the registry files, you can access these things without disrupting operations, generally speaking, because they're saved off to a different location. Right? It can be performed quickly. Try to minimize the impact on the forensic investigation. So if you don't need to do things on the machine itself, meaning if the logs are created on the machine and sent to a different location, there's less disruption on the host itself. So the low cards exchange principle, right? You minimize the number of times you touch a host or touch a file. It minimizes the traces and any other thing that may, taint or contaminate things that you're looking for, right? Allows resources to be allocated to systems identified through triage for an in-depth analysis. Then, of course, a pretty big key is to minimize the impact on the stakeholders, right? The organization and their users, if at all possible. So going about it with the lightweight collections first versus like jumping in with your write blockers and all your hard drives and all that will minimize that impact, right? The servers don't have to be taken down, and the users don't necessarily have to relinquish their machines or go to a backup location and use other equipment. So it's just an example of IIS server, a Microsoft product log showing a vulnerability scanning activity. I don't know if you can see this very well, but you'll notice most of these have like the my admin script setup. So these are some pretty typical file locations. But the very top one there, the V20X, is kind of a strange, and it stands out as something that nobody generally makes a folder called that to go and get stuff. So that may be where they went to grab their malware or their scanning software to run. So this could just be one of the steps that you could find within a log. So this is the event logs on a Windows 7 system. If you look up there, this is the FTK imager. You can mount hard drive images onto the imager here, the FTK imager, and you can take a look inside of the registries. And that way, you don't necessarily have to have direct access to it. You can view things just by having a copy of it. And this is more. If you notice here, here's the security account manager, the SAM file that they talk about. And you can see the date that it was modified, so that's the type of thing that you'll be looking at when you access this to see if you can get a clue as to what happened in an incident. Okay, so the benefits of collected logs, the light logs, right? They provide the addresses, the usernames for use for triage criteria. Your server logs, they'll give you possibility of ingress points if you're talking about your public-facing web servers. Vulnerability scanning attempts will show up a lot of times in those logs. Your FTP, your secure shell, and your email and other authentication-based services. VPN, and again, the radius information that is logged will help you pinpoint or maybe the initial ingress or possibly some subsequent. If you know what account it works out to be, you can see where all the times that account's been accessed and provides the internal IP address used by the intruder. And then firewall, right? Depending on your logging level, you can find out information about an attacker when they were trying things across your firewall. And then the event logs that we talked about, auditing whether people when they logged on and logged off, their processes, the objects when they were accessed, and antivirus detection also shows up in those event logs. IDS, IPS, and DLP, data loss prevention, right? You can possibly detect attempts by attackers to infiltrate or exfiltrate. Most of the time it'll be exfiltrate. Sometimes you can catch things being uploaded going in. And antivirus, of course, failed attempts by the intruder to infiltrate hacking tools. Sometimes that'll be obvious. It's interesting from a red team standpoint that you do all this stuff to get in, and then some simple antivirus catches your payload, and then you're not happy. So the registry, essentially the registry in Windows holds every configuration that the operating system knows about. So there are so many pieces of information that you can get from the registry. It is an unwieldy beast for those of you who have ever used anything like Regedit or something to go look for stuff. It's not as easy to go and search and find things, but generally speaking, it's in there. So you can get at data. You just have to work pretty hard to get at it. Possible applications and service installation traces, right? If you see a PSExec or PSExec service installed. Most recently used information is in the registry. So you can go and look and see if that intruder got in and what they were looking at, perhaps on that host. You can go into the registry and find that. The commands executed from the run prompt, if that's what they were using. Attached local devices, if this is an possible internal threat, you can go and see if they use a USB type of drive or a USB thumb drive. And then malware persistence in the auto run mechanism. There's a few different ways to do that within Windows in particular, but you can find those if you look carefully. So here's just a basic flow chart for triaging based on those logs and what information is available on the workstation and servers. Okay, and then we'll move on to triage in the general collection, because the lightweight, like I said, minimizes impact, but at some point you're going to have to go into the general collection and really go after your targets. Right, bare hard drive acquisition. You go in there with your write blockers and you make the copies or the images of the hard drive that you need. It is quite slow. You're talking about, possibly terabytes of information on a particular drive, and it's going to be limited too by the write blocker interface and that speed as well. So you're not just doing the fastest possible, but whatever it is, USB 3 versus USB 2, right? Have you ever tried to transfer data? Have you noticed the differences when you use a USB 2 thumb drive versus a USB 3 and you're trying to move gigabytes of data? It takes significantly longer, right? So keep that in mind as you go forward. Imaging and verification, right? That's that hashing piece where you want to verify that you're getting a good forensic copy. At least the source system downtime, generally speaking, because you don't want people doing anything on it, right? So if it's somebody's machine that got compromised, but it was kind of in the background, that person is going to have to give up that machine for the time that you need, and make sure you get a complete collection. And to acquire it over the network, right? Works fine as long as the machine is not shut down or the network connection fails. Those of you that have used a VPN before to work from home, have you ever had your VPN go down? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's, interesting when you're in the middle of something and your document may or may not have been saved, but it's also a pain when you're, 100 megabytes away from a 1 terabyte hard drive being done that you may be acquiring across the network. So that could be an issue to think about. Right? And then also hard drive contents can change as acquisition is performed. If someone doesn't let everybody else around there know that, hey, leave this machine alone today because we we're getting a hardware acquisition, or I'm sorry, a hard disk imaging, and somebody walks up to and goes, "Oh, I need this machine real quick," and they turn it on. So now that could be an issue when you're talking about remote, right? And network latency. I think everybody's dealt with that before. Then another possibility is sending a technician or using a local person on site to get that information. But that can be time consuming because you obviously have to get, you might have to get tickets, or you may have to drive a certain amount of time to get to the location, right? And then there's also, risk to original evidence minimized, though, because hopefully you send somebody who knows what they're doing. And then there's always the ship or hand carry the hard drive, sometimes very, very important information. Classified information for the military sometimes is couriered, so it's hand carried, but that is very, very expensive and quite time consuming, so it's not something that you can do really quickly. So if you're acquiring information that way, you have to build that into your timeline to be able to access that data. Okay, so the types: volatile memory collection, grabbing the physical RAM, right? And then we talked about network packet capture, and depending on the network architecture, this may make your collection challenging. We talked about where to place a sniffer, that sort of thing. And if you happen to have a pretty complicated network setup, then you may have to go in place, move the sniffer from area to area, and that can be a pain as well. And then depending on the traffic, if you have a very large and very active network, you may lose packets, right? They may drop. So your collection method has to be as fast and as robust as possible, but even then sometimes you may be losing packets. You may not get everything you need. The other side of that, of course, is as when you have a large amount of data crossing the network, your media that you're saving it on will fill up in a hurry. So you have to pay attention to just how fast that's getting filled up, so you don't accidentally lose packets based on the fact that you did not remove and change out to a different media. Excuse me. Okay, acquired logical and physical media. So you can go out and grab unallocated space or clusters, and you go through that using keywords, and then you can also carve for files based on that file signature that we talked about before, and look for key areas within that unallocated space. When you acquire it this way, done properly, of course, evidence integrity is protected. It's not limited by the original system hardware. Can be used for recovery of deleted files, which is great. So you can go in there, and even though when you delete a file, the file itself generally is not deleted, depending on the system you have. It's just the pointer to that file that gets erased. So it's kind of like taking your address off your mailbox. If it's no longer there, no one can find your mail cannot get to your address, type of thing. So the file itself will still exist when people try to delete it. So you can go in and use, again, the file signature type of thing and do some carving. And also it's nice that you get this kind of logical or the imaging done. So you can scan for malware using other antivirus software that may not be since conceivably the antivirus software, the security software on that compromised host may have been tampered with. You may want to run either security software or antivirus software against that image from a different non-compromised, known good system. Okay, volatile memory collection. Some of the benefits you can get from it. You analyze that volatile data for, it's like the most recently used list is that LSOF, some of the network connections, in-memory processes, right? You can only grab those while the volatile memory is active, and check it, see if it's scanned for malware. Network packet capture can can be used to analyze traffic to identify the compromised hosts where other things go. If you use some of the NetFlow data, you can see where things have traveled to and from that particular host. And you can also use that information to develop some signatures or filters through your IDS, IPS, or DLP systems. And then used also to develop firewall rules if they use a particularly interesting or odd port or service. You can stop that at the firewall.